John Lee Real Estate, find you the best rate. All throughout Philly like Schuylkill Expressway. Talking to people who added.
What if I told you the average first-time home buyer today is 40 years old? It's not 28, it's not 30. Let that sink in. According to the National Association of Realtors, first-time buyers now make up just 21% of all home purchases. That's it, just 21%. And that is the lowest level since they started tracking in 1981. And before 2008, first-time home buyers were closer to 40% of the market. So we have two big shifts happening at the same time. Fewer first-time buyers, and the ones who are buying are 10 years older than the previous generation. So the question is simple. Is the starter home dead? Or do the rules of the game change? Today, I want to break this down and speak to this because from a numbers perspective and also from a real life perspective, I'm in the trenches with buyers and sellers every single week in the Philadelphia and greater Philadelphia area. And I see the frustration, I see the competition, and I also see opportunity. So this is not a doom episode. It's actually a doom of information and hope. And I want to really dig deep down on the age shift, right? And the history of it. In 1981, the median age of a first-time buyer was 29 years old. In 2010, that was 30 years old. And in 2024, it jumped to 38. So basically that's 40 years, right? So we added a full decade to the clock. So the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old, guys. And this is not just about age. This is about wealth compounding, right? So if you buy your first home at, let's just say 30 instead of 40, you are not just buying earlier, you are getting 10 additional years of appreciation, principal paydown, forced savings, and leverage. So let's say someone bought a $300,000 home at age 30 over 10 years, and maybe it appreciates to $450,000. They paid down maybe $60,000 to $80,000 in principal during that time, and that is easily $150,000 to $200,000 in equity growth. That equity becomes the down payment for the next house, and this is how the ladder worked. Now imagine someone who waits until 40 to buy their first home. They do not have the first decade of compounding. They are starting at a square one rate, and at that exact moment, prices are higher and rates are higher, right? So that is not a small difference, and it's definitely a struggle for the first-time home buyers now. And that is a structural shift in wealth building. And locally, I can tell you, I have seen it. So for example, homes in Lansdale, Hatfield, Bluebell, I mean, these were homes at $250,000, $300,000 in 2010. Now they are $450,000 to $600,000 depending on condition and location, and that's being very generous. So if you miss that first cycle, it feels like you're trying to board a moving train. I want to talk about the other side of the market. While first-time home buyers are struggling, existing homeowners are sitting on massive equity, right? So roughly 44.6% of mortgage homes in the United States are considered equity rich. So what does that mean? It means homeowners owe less than half of what the property is worth. So think about that. Someone buys in 2015 for $300,000 and the home might now be worth $550,000. They could easily be sitting on $200,000 to $300,000 in equity. So here's where it gets interesting. About 30% of repeat buyers are paying cash. That's where all these cash buyers are coming from. So when a first-time home buyer walks in with 5 or 10% down, they're not just competing against another young couple. They are competing against someone who has just sold their last house and is walking away with $200,000 in equity, and they have cash in hand. That creates what I call the equity wall. It's not personal. I know sometimes some of my clients do take it that way. It's just math, right? I've had buyers lose to cash multiple times, and I've seen appraisal gaps, and I've seen escalation clauses get blown out of the water, and it feels unfair for first-time home buyers. And that is exactly what is happening, what we call when one group had time in the market and the other group unfortunately did not. So that gap is continuing to get bigger and it's compounded. There is what I call the lock-in effect, right? I want to address the question everyone had in 2022 and 2023, which I had addressed it before. Why did the housing market not crash? Because of the lock-in effect. Million homeowners refinance when rates were 2 to 4%. So for example, my own home is 3%, right? My first home that I bought is 3%. So if you had a 3% mortgage on a $400,000 loan, your principal and interest payment might be something around $1,700. And at 6%, that same loan is $2,400 a month. So that is a massive difference. So even if someone wants to move, upgrading means doubling their interest expense in many cases. So what do? They ain't moving. They're just going to stay, right? And I don't blame them. People are staying because they renovate instead of moving. They hold instead of listing. That keeps inventory low, right? The demand of properties become low. And when supply is low, the prices don't collapse. They freeze or drift up slowly. And that's kind of the period of struggle that we're in right now. So instead of a crash, we got to melt up and a freeze at the same time. So demand cooled, but supply collapsed harder. Who is buying? So who is actually buying? The first time buyers who are getting in are not doing it alone. So about 22% are using gifts from families or loans from friends and family. 14% of them are buying multi-generational homes, right? This is a cultural shift. Even for me, I lived with my in-laws for 2 years before buying my house, right? And this is coming from someone who owns over 20 units. So now it's independence at 35, right? Payments help. There's parents that are helping, right, with down payments. Adult children are staying longer. Families are pulling resources. And honestly, that is not entirely negative. Many cultures have operated this way for generations, right, including mine. So it doesn't mean that the definition of a starter home is changing. It is no longer the small house you buy alone at 27, right? It might be a duplex, like what I did, right? A house hack, right? It might be a shared purchase with a family member or even a friend to help you, right? It might be a condo instead of a detached home. So I want to call this the missing decade. If someone buys at 25 or 28, their 30s are spent building equity. But if someone buys at 40, their 30s were spent renting in an appreciating market. So let me be clear. Renting is not throwing money away. Ultimately, it allows flexibility or income growth, right? But from a pure wealth compounding standpoint, ownership historically created forced saving, right? So here's the real question. If housing is no longer a ladder, is it becoming a club, right? Is it something you need, or is it based on fear? So I completely get it, but I do not believe the dream is dead. I just believe now, because of home ownership is just, you have to be older. I just think that the strategy ultimately needs to change. So here is what I tell my buyers, right? Think smaller and earlier. The first property does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be strategic. Condo, townhomes, house hack, something that gets you in the game, right? And then you just expand geographically, right? Maybe maybe it's not Bluebell, right? Because Bluebell can be extremely expensive. Maybe it's not even Hatfield or Lansdale. Maybe it's a further north or different school districts. And you ultimately want to focus on income growth. So if homes are 5 to 7 times income, right, the lever may not just be price. It might be increasing your income, increasing your earnings. So the other thing is just consider partnership buying, siblings, spouse, friends, parents, structured accordingly, and look for opportunity in imperfection. Renovation loans. My home was a 203K loan, right? Estate sales, properties that scare retail buyers. I personally did a renovation loan on my own first home, right? It's not glamorous, but it created equity. That is how I built wealth, ownership, and leverage over time. So the starter home may not look like it did in 1995, right? It may not be 3 times income anymore like it used to be, right? But the principles of wealth building has not changed. Control an appreciating asset and use leverage responsibly and give it time. The American dream is not dead. It's just more competitive. And in a competitive environment, strategy ultimately matters. So if this episode resonated, Share it with someone who feels like they missed the window and feels extremely frustrated in this market, because maybe they didn't miss it. Maybe they just need a different door in.
John Lee Real Estate, find you the best rates. All throughout Philly like Schuylkill Expressway. Talking to people who out of